Good morning, Giants. Welcome to Wake Up with Giants TV. Have you ever wondered how a promise can change your life? I promise you're going to want to stick around.
I promise.
Promise. Good morning, Giants. Welcome to Wake Up with Giants TV. I'm Ryan Morris, and as always, I'm here with your host, Nicholas T. Smith, the author of the book, The Giants and the Smalls. If you haven't subscribed on YouTube, go ahead and do that. Hit the subscribe button so you can know when we go live. It's just a little bell, ding it, and then hop on to Facebook and join our tribe. It's a tribe of giants. That's where we all get together, we talk and support each other, and lots of good people inside of that tribe.
I'm gonna throw Mallory off here. Like keep moving her around on the
Just move.
screen, and she's like, "The hell are you
Okay,
doing?"
my head's cut off. Hold on.
That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna keep it lively tonight.
Yeah, musical chairs here.
Yeah, but that's okay.
Well, we know it's gonna be a good show because we got a little bit of technical difficulties, but that's always a good sign.
That's how it all works sometimes.
Yeah,
Our best guests have had a little bit of technical issues.
I've got technical issues.
I got a lot of technical issues,
Yeah.
technically speaking.
Technically,
Nick,
All right.
you want to introduce our guest?
I was ready for Alex Dumas to jump on and start
I know.
doing bad jokes.
Yeah,
but
he would.
he will.
We love
He
you,
will.
Alex.
All right, yeah, we've got Malory Ruesch on, and she's an author, speaker, survivor, and her passion is on fire. So her rock bottom has become the foundation for what she's building right now. So it's been foundational for her career. Her greatest strength is loving others until they're strong enough to love themselves, which we see a lot of, especially in our community. You know, there's a lot of people that are working on that. So she travels to high schools to speak about addiction and recovery, using her story to bring hope and inspire everyone she meets. She's soon to be published, which is really rad. A book called Inspired to Recover, an intense memoir about a promise that changed her life forever. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit tonight. And she's working on a healing program for anyone whose life has been impacted by addiction. So Malory's greatest goal is to talk with as many schools, rehabs, facilities, institutions, and groups as possible in order to help individuals identify healing strategies early enough to avoid a long road of addiction, because healing is the ultimate goal. And so if you know somebody that could serve her in that, please do. We'll put her information up here on the bottom. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, guys.
She
You're
was also
good.
recently on Good Things Utah as well.
Yes, yes.
And has a little bit of a coffee addiction as well from one of the posts that I saw.
Even tonight.
Oh,
It was like a 44-ounce Dutch Brothers coffee. She's like,
literally right before we got on here, he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm making Christmas coffee cake and heating up some coffee." And he's
Oh.
like, "Right now?" I'm like, "Absolutely. I'm an author, guys. I live on that stuff."
I guess it'll make sense right now since this will air in the morning.
right?
So that's perfect. Yeah, good time
perfect.
for coffee. Not at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night.
Nope. In
Yeah.
the morning is the best time for
I know. I'm
coffee.
working on becoming a morning person. I'll get there eventually.
Nah, dude, you don't have to do that. It's terrible. It's
the
not all they
worst.
say.
I agree.
Yeah.
Especially when you have little ones that wake up so early. It's like, oh man.
Yeah. I would be a nightmare.
Nick doesn't have little ones that wake up early. He just gets up early.
And then I start talking to myself.
And then start answering back, right?
Yeah.
That's when it really gets weird. Is when he
Full on
answers back.
dialogues. Like, wow.
That's
this
when
is
you know
really-
you're
Yeah.
crisis.
This is really sad. So we, as we dive into your story, we're going to go all the way back in time. So we usually like to create a start point somewhere, whether that's in childhood or in addiction or wherever it was. I don't know. I don't know a lot about your backstory. So this is where we're going to dive into it. And so wherever you feel like your story began, go to that point and let's start there, because that becomes foundational for the transformation that you experienced.
That'll help serve the tribe too, because the tribe of
Yeah.
giants will be able to relate to, hey, is she like me, or am I like her, or they can find some connection points too.
because they don't relate to us if we're honest. Like a lot of them,
Yeah,
they're like these
sleeveless
two dudes.
dudes. Yeah, wearing Marcus shirts on air.
Okay, guys.
Okay, stop, guys.
She's
Ready
like,
to go.
okay, settled.
Let's see where's a good place here. Gonna get me acting funny.
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, a little bit about my childhood. I am the youngest of 5 girls. 3 of them are on my dad's side, and then my closest one is 10 years older than me, and she and I have the same mom. I grew up with a mom who struggled with alcoholism, a major battle with alcoholism. And my dad never really wanted a part of my life. He never really reached out. He never spoke to me. I had no idea just why he had never come home. I think that was probably the first thing that really impacted me. I remember, Christmas time was a very sensitive thing for me because my sister, my closest sister, she's very close with her father. And so every Christmas, there would be a huge box that would show up with, I mean, I'm talking hundreds of gifts. And it just tore me to shreds. Like it wasn't about the gift. It was like, what is it about her that makes her lovable and me not?
Yeah.
And so my mom definitely juggled being a mom and a dad for me. But fast forward to when I was about 13, my mom, on my 13th birthday, she was like, Mal, what are you going to wish for? And I told her, I go, Mom, I just want you to not drink for this one birthday. And she was like, okay. So I had a bunch of friends coming over. We were going to have one of those little girly sleepovers, that girls have. And we were so excited. And after we do the cake, I blow out the candle, wishing for the same thing I told my mom earlier. The party continued. And then within hours, I saw my mom drink in the kitchen. And that night, her addiction got bad enough to where I ended up moving with my aunt, and she ended up temporarily adopting me overnight. I changed schools, I changed homes, I changed families. I mean, in a matter of literal hours. And that was pretty stressful. Yeah. So then as I started getting into high school, I've always been a straight A student. I love school. I love learning. I'm like a sponge. Anything, constructive criticism is my favorite thing. So did really well in school, got to high school. I was in yearbook. I was in the Success Academy. I was doing college classes half the time and then high school classes half the time. I was a high school cheerleader. I was like what they would, label as the good one, the popular one, like the one that had her head on straight, but there was a lot of deep issues burning inside me that I didn't want anyone to know about. I didn't want to judge based on that. I wanted to judge based on the person that I was without those problems. And for me, school gave me that opportunity to almost, I guess, hide all the flaws that I had through my grades. That was the way that I validated my self-worth. Like, how can someone be worthless if they're a straight A student and they're smart and they're loved by so many people? The problems really started to begin when I started doing college classes half the time and high school half the time. So I'd go to the college and then I'd come back for like one class at the high school. The problem with this is that I was gaining friends that were much better than me and in the college life, right? So there's parties all the time. And one night I got invited to a party, and right when I walk in, they offer me a beer. And in my mind, I wanted to be loved. I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to look normal. And so I ended up drinking the beer that night. And little did I know that that cup of beer was going to lead to a very long road for me.
Yeah. Let's I want to anchor this in, because this is going into the journey out of, what would become, right? And so laying the foundation for that is you had these experiences growing up that were foundational to that. So that when you drank that beer, I mean, it moved you into what's going to follow here. Um, keep going. I just want to anchor that in is like, sometimes we don't even know that we're going into it and we get into that unconscious state, and then life is occurring and we're not necessarily in control of it anymore.
Right.
Does
Yeah.
that sound accurate?
Yeah. Absolutely. And if you just want to comment on anything, please do. Let's cut right in. So from that point on, I started going to parties and partying every weekend. And pretty soon one beer turned into two turned into three. And every weekend I was easily able to finish a 12 pack. Smoking started to begin. And I really started to feel like I had people who didn't know my problems at home, didn't know where I came from, and just liked me for me, intoxicated me. So from that point, at one of these parties, there was a guy. He was so cute, and he was the life of the party. Everyone loved him. Very extroverted like me. We hit it off that night, and this relationship, before I knew it, became a long term. It was based on partying. It was based on friends, and it was based on just being messed up whenever we could be. And that's all we ever knew of each other. So one night at a party, marijuana was being passed around, and I indulged in that. And by mixing the beer and the marijuana, I was extremely sick, like did not feel good. I had a pounding migraine, and I went over to my boyfriend at the time and I was like, hey, I have a major migraine. Can we leave? He ends up reaching into his pocket and pulling out a little blue pill. And he's like, take this, it'll make you feel better. So, in my mind, I want to emphasize that my belief in this relationship started, my father's absence definitely played a part in it. I think that's one of the most often asked questions when I tell my stories. Did that father affect relationships? Absolutely. For older guys, absolutely, because I was looking to be protected. I was looking to be taken care of. I was looking for a stable and secure man. Not in the healthy sense of a way, but more of an emotional void. So I was like, well, someone who loves me wouldn't give me something that's going to hurt me. And I ended up swallowing the pill, and that was the beginning of the oxycodone addiction. So I realized that now I could numb the feelings I was feeling inside with something so little versus a 30 pack and 5 bowls that were being passed around all night. It was very quick that this oxycodone and relationship turned into doing pills multiple ways, having, spending every dime that we earned on them. And it got to a point where we were meeting people in the community that had the same addiction as us, right? Like you all kind of got together doing the same thing and seeing each other's bad behavior. So we started meeting all these other oxycodone addicts, and oxycodone at this time was not every oxycodone addict looked like an oxycodone addict. Like they were not people you'd ever see me, this person that everyone knew me as, involving herself with. And so we start getting involved with all these people, and one of his friends ends up convincing my boyfriend that he could get a prescription. And this is when the whole opiate pandemic was hitting Vegas. So one day I am standing by the door. My boyfriend's out in the living room talking to his friend, and his friend is saying, "Hey, bud, like, in order to get you a prescription that's not going to be questioned because of the pandemic we're going through, I have an idea." And he was like, "Okay." So my boyfriend actually placed his chest on the couch and his legs straight behind him. And I watched as his friend jumped on his back, like hurting him extremely bad. And I remember feeling in this moment like, wow, this pill has so much value in our minds that we're willing to sacrifice anything, even our own health, like our, functions. And that day, he got rushed to the emergency room, and they gave him, all the things looking to get. And his friend, when he came back from the hospital, his friend's like, "Listen, I'm going to write out some medical papers," because his friend actually did have a spine problem. And he was like, "I'm going to fix all these papers to make sure that you're going to be able to qualify for as many as you need," basically. So his friend ended up forging all these papers. And before I knew it, we were driving back and forth to Vegas multiple times a week, filling 5 prescriptions of over 300 pills each. And we were hooked. We were completely addicted by this point.
Man, I tie this in, like, this all starts from deep emotions and things that aren't healed, right? And you go in and you find a way to numb, and then that numbing becomes an addiction. And correct me if I'm wrong in this. And then it gets to where that now controls you. It's like that thing is your its servant. Let me say it that way, right? Like, it gets to the point where you no longer have a say in your life. And so I know people will relate to this, and I'm wondering, so how did you wake up from that? Like, what was it in your life that had you step back and say, "Man, what's going on? What am I doing?" You know what I mean? What was your awakening at that point?
Oh, so no, yeah, I was not awake yet.
Okay.
I had not even hit my rock bottom yet.
Yeah.
We ended up getting all these prescriptions, started getting into the distribution game. And one day we were actually about to travel to Vegas, and my boyfriend's phone rings, and it was a doctor, and he was calling him, and he was like, "Hey," this was like 3 months later. He's like, "Sorry, we can no longer fill your prescriptions." And after that first doctor, then it was another doctor, then it was another doctor. So all of a sudden, all these prescriptions were getting canceled, and we were completely physically hooked. So we started looking all over town. People were saving what they had for them. And so my boyfriend's brother ended up coming in. He's like, "I know a guy, I can get you some, whatever." So he ends up coming back from doing a drug deal, and it was heroin. So I, at the time, was so worried about the physical withdrawal from the pills that I didn't think twice. I mean, for me right now, it was like my relationship was so codependent. It didn't matter what he did. Like, I believed in my mind that he was protecting me. And so I ended up, then my oxycodone addiction became heroin. And that ended up going for a while and got pretty deep. And then by the time that 2013 hit, I remember getting to a point where I honestly, to this day, guys, don't know what clicked. I thought about it over and over and over, but one day, me and my boyfriend and a bunch were in our room using everything: heroin, meth, oxycodone, weed, everything that we could get our hands on. And I was just like, you know what? I looked around the room and I started thinking about all the dreams I had as a child and the successful life that I wanted. And I was like, this is not it. Like, this is not fitting in with where I want to be. That night, I vowed to myself and to God that I was not going to use anymore. And I ended up telling my boyfriend, he's like, "Are you kidding me? Like, you're going to withdraw. You can't just stop. And I was like, I know. And he's like, okay. So I ended up going through 3 days of withdrawal from everything while my boyfriend was still in the room using,
Wow.
basically laughing and waiting for me to give in. He didn't think I was strong enough to do it. 3 days later, I ended up waking up. It was Mother's Day of 2013. And I hadn't talked to my mom in a really long time. I had basically been living at his house. You know, that's what addicts do, is they hide, don't want the people who love them the most to see how bad they're doing. And so I call my mom and I go, she answers and I start bawling. And I'm like, hey, Mom, I'm so sorry. Like, I've been clean. I miss you. I just want to see you. And she's like, okay, how about me, you, and your sister go to breakfast? So that morning, we go to breakfast, have a great afternoon that was long overdue. And I go, Mom, I really just want to come home. And she's like, okay. My only stipulation is that you move in with me and come back. And I was like, okay. So she's like, I have a pedicure appointment with her mom and her siblings. She's like, I'm going to go to that, but Amber will follow you. Amber's my sister. She's like, Amber will follow you back to your boyfriend's house to pack all your stuff and come home. And I was like, okay, perfect. So we end up going and driving to my house to pack all my things. The second I pull in the driveway, St. George SWAT hits my house. They yank me out of the car, throw me to the floor, cuff me, throw me up against a tree. And I honestly remember in this moment being at a complete loss for words. Like, the thoughts that were going through my mind were like, what are the odds? Like, I go through these 3 days of sickening withdrawal. I give up and I'm willing to sacrifice whatever I can to go home. Like, I'm fully ready to like hit recovery hard, get my life back, and it's taken away from me. And it was in that moment that I really realized that, you know, just because we decide to get clean doesn't mean that we don't have wreckage to repair, and that there isn't a price to pay for the choices we've already made.
Yeah.
So they ended up raiding our house. And I was
You know what's interesting? Can you pause for just 1 sec? So hold that, because I related that in my mind, because I've never been addicted to drugs, but I have made a lot of choices that then I changed what I was doing, and I hoped that none of my choices would have the negative consequences. And sometimes it didn't. Sometimes it was delayed long enough, or something went right in the universe, that somebody was watching my back, and that luckily for me, maybe I just got away with it. I don't know. Maybe it's still coming.
yeah,
Right, right. But yeah, but that it's true in anything, is that your choices, all of them, have consequences.
right.
Sometimes you might not see them, and you might not see them quickly, and you might not know that, hey, this is, but I mean, it's equal, up. What is the Newton's, is it Newton's law? Every action has an equal opposite reaction.
You know,
Whose law is that?
I don't know, but I
That's a
like it.
law. But every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Every single decision, everything that you do has consequences, positive, negative, whatever you want to call them, but it has consequences. And at that moment in time, even though, like, hey, you made that choice, and that's an amazing choice. That was an amazing decision, and very brave thing to do, to get clean and to start over. But I loved how then you followed it up with, just because that happened didn't mean I didn't have to have, to repay for what all the crap that I did.
right. And
So
it
anyway,
reminds me of a quote too. It says that all of our bad choices will have consequences. All of our good choices will have a sacrifice. And I am able to use that a lot today in my daily life. And that's a lot of the time how I can decipher whether what I'm doing is a good choice or a bad choice. You know, what are the consequences and what are the sacrifices? So, okay. So, where was I
so
at?
then the SWAT comes,
Okay.
pins you up against a tree, and then we kind of went from
So
there.
SWAT hits my house, and I end up going to jail. So does Nolan, on a paraphernalia and possession charge. They had been watching my house for about 3.5 months, all the trips that we were making. Actually, in the file, I haven't put this on any other podcast, but I thought this was kind of crazy to hear.
Woohoo.
So what
Exclusive.
Yeah, we like it. I'm like,
the secrets? No, I'm just kidding. The dirty details.
yeah, here they go.
So SWAT actually got a garbage truck, and I remember this so vividly because my boyfriend's dad, he would sit outside and just watch the trees and the birds, right? So he noticed like all these little things, and the garbage truck one time came on garbage day, took only our trash, and then kept going. And he was like, that was weird. And then a couple hours later, the actual trash came. So what they had done is the SWAT had lined the truck and were able to use anything in the trash as evidence correlating to us. So I thought that was kind of clever and never would have thought of that. But
What, guys?
yeah, what are the odds?
Sneaky.
Yeah.
So anyway, I get to jail. And
Never gonna look at the garbage man the same.
Yeah. Very sneaky.
Watching my receipts from Costco. Spent a lot of money there.
So I end up going to jail. I'm in there for about a week, and my normal weight's about 135, and I was hitting about 90 pounds at this time. My face was not doing great. You know, I obviously looked like an addict. But I called my mom right as I got to jail, and I was like, Mom, please come get me. Like, you know, I was going to come home. You know that I'm clean. Like, we just had a great day. Like, please come get me. So my stepdad and her ended up agreeing to bail me out under the fact that I still follow the stipulation of moving home. And I was like, absolutely no problem. Coming. And so she ends up coming and bailing me out. And she takes me over to my boyfriend's house herself this time so that I can pack my things. We get there and she's apologizing to his dad, and I go in the room and I open the door, and I kid you not, I literally thought I was being tested, because in the middle of the floor, wide open floor, was a blue container. And I knew what was in that blue container because that's what we held all of our heroin in. That container was sitting in the middle of the floor, and I went to go pick it up and realized that there was a full pill bottle full of meth under the bed, right there by the foot. And I was sitting here thinking, how in the heck does SWAT hit your house and leave the evidence they have against you? Like, I was so confused. So my mom's like, Mal, are you ready? She's outside talking to Scott. She hadn't seen that I had found these things. And I just start throwing all my stuff in boxes, and I put that stuff in the bottom of the box thinking I'll just deal with it later. So I end up going to my mom's house. And then later that night, I undig the drugs and I sit there and I stare at them, and I'm like, I'm not going to be taken down by heroin again. So I end up dumping the heroin down the toilet. And then I look at the meth bottle and I'm like, you know what? I could sell this and make money to get back on my feet. And that simple thought, that one thought wrong, thinking that as long as I don't use it, I'll be okay, took me down a whole nother road. I ended up becoming an IV user of methamphetamine. I started hanging out with the wrong people again, disappearing again, except this time, you know, I had to worry about the track marks up and down my arms, and cheating places like Walgreens and Rite Aid out of diabetic needles, and just so much chaos. So within 3 months, I destroyed my life again completely. And I realized that my drug of choice was methamphetamine. It was an upper. It's what matched my personality. And it gave me this false belief that, like, I can accomplish everything and anything on my to-do list. People love me. It brought this false confidence, this false energy, that really it didn't numb me like heroin, but took me out of the negative thoughts in my head. So within 3 months, by August of 2013, I was arrested and charged with over 15 felonies, 13 misdemeanors. And I was facing nearly 30 years in prison at the age of 19 years old. Yeah. So, yeah, I end up getting arrested again, get charged with all these things. And I did about 4 months in jail. And then they released me into the drug court program. I failed the drug court program. I failed inpatient treatment. I failed outpatient treatment. And I just really was in a really sick mindset. I mean, this wasn't a light consequence anymore. I could potentially be spending most of my life in a prison. So I was just giving up. And I just felt like I believed like my life was too far gone to save. Oh, I'm going to start getting emotional. I just felt like my life was too far gone at this point to save. And I could feel myself giving up. So they set my trial date, and I end up getting to the courthouse. And I remember sitting in the parking lot, and I was shooting up right there. I'm like, well, if I'm going to go away, like what's wrong with one last use? So I go into the courthouse, and literally right as the judge was about to slam his hammer on his desk, sentencing me and taking me right out of the courtroom doors flung open, and this guy comes walking in, and he asks the judge if he can speak with him. So he goes up with prosecution, and the judge talks for what seemed like forever. I was out of my mind, so I didn't really care what was going on. And after a while, the judge looks at me and he goes, Mallory, I don't know what Chuck thinks he can do for you, but I'm going to give him a chance. I'm sentencing you to a 3-year private probation, 0 tolerance. He's like, if you mess up one time, I promise I will make an example out of you, and released me. So that day I ended up walking out of the courtroom with one more chance.
Wow.
Oh, don't get too excited. I messed it all up. I messed it up again. Yeah, no. This is like, woo!
Yeah.
You know what's crazy is so 19 years old. This is how old you are? 19?
Yep.
And I know you're not supposed to ask a lady how old they are, but how old are you now?
I turned 28 in February.
Okay, so and Nick, how long until the brain is fully developed?
25.
So like these are choices that you're making, as a teenager, not fully understanding all of the consequences that are about to hit.
Right.
And like I'm sitting back going, oh my gosh, like I watched a friend go through this, not quite like what you did, but heroin, and it was a crazy, crazy experience to watch his process, the lying, the stealing, the manipulation, all for drugs,
Right.
and knowing his potential, knowing what he could be, and not having, I mean, that young, you don't know all of the consequences. I'm thinking like that many felonies, I would be like, I'd be losing my mind,
Yeah. Yeah. And, I do want to add in too that, looking back now, I realized that all the choices I was making were because of underlying causes that hadn't been dealt with. I mean, obviously in the time I didn't have any of those. There was no awakening really for me. Like I was unaware of why I was making these decisions because I just didn't want to deal with it. But
or didn't know how to, right? Like, I mean, nobody ever took you aside and said, hey, this is what your brain is doing. This is what's happening. This is what you went through. Is hard, the abandonment and the neglect and the feeling of not being loved, and then giving you tools. If somebody would have given you some different tools or helped you see that, things could have been completely different, because you would know what to do with those emotions and process those, or at least had a better shot at it.
Well, I hear too inside of this is that there's hope no matter how dark it gets. like you're here on the other side of this. You're 28 now. This was when you were 19, going well till 2013. So yeah, I mean, you were about 21, 22 toward the tail end of this. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I want you to finish out your story, but for the show, I really want to tap into like your steps to recovery and coming to where you are today. And so,
Yeah. So all that will play out in the story.
okay, all
Hey,
right.
and I was right. It is
We're,
Newton's
you know that
third
build
law,
up,
just in
you're
case
like
anyone's keeping
building it
track.
up, you know,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
excited, and then we're just gonna tear the whole show down.
That's how we do.
Yeah. So I ended up getting on with Chuck, and he was like, "Okay, like I'll see you in a couple weeks." I was like, "What? Like you're just gonna let me go? Like what do you?" He's like, "Yep, see ya. Like you'll just be at my place to drug test." I'm like, "Okay." Well, that night I ended up stealing my mom's car, going to Vegas, running amok again. And as I'm coming back within 24 hours, Chuck calls me. And he's like, "Hey, Mal." And I was like, "Hey, Chuck, I need you to come into my office." And I was like, "Why?" And he's like, "Just come down." So I ended up going in there. And I had been using all night long. Like I was a mess, and you could tell. And I sat down at his desk, and I had made up every excuse not to drug test. And I even tried to fake my test, and he caught me. And he sits at his desk, and he grabs this paper from the fax machine, and he starts filling it out. And I was like, "What is that?" And he's like, "This is the paper, the report that I'm sending to the judge. Like, you're gone. Like you had one chance and you messed it up." And in that moment, I just started bawling, and I was like, "Please, please, please, please don't send that to the judge. Like, I know I can do it. I've done it before. Like, I know I can get clean. I know I'm better than this. And I don't understand why I keep throwing away my chances." And he stands up on the desk, and he hit that desk so hard I thought it was going to break in half. And he's like, "What the hell do I have to do to get you to want to live?" And I looked at him and I said, "I just want to be inspired to recover. I don't want to be punished into recovery anymore." And, we had multiple conversations after this about how, why did all those programs fail for you? Why were you not willing to get through this and those? And for me, I grew up, going like with my mom's addiction. A lot of the time I was raising myself, and I took pride in that. I took pride in the fact that I was strong and was able to be there for myself when no one else was. And instead of being told what to do, I guess like I just was not good with discipline. I had a defiance, like, don't tell me how to live my life, and don't tell me what I need to do, because I know best, because I know what I've been through best, and that belief really drove me into a dark place. Like I just wanted control. So from this point on, from this day, Chuck rips up the paper and throws it in the garbage and never ends up sending it to the judge. He goes, "Malory, from this day on, you have an assignment. I want you to call me every day for the next 6 months." He goes, "If I don't answer, leave a 1-minute voicemail about how your day went. And if I do answer, then we'll just have a conversation." He goes, "This is going to do 2 things for me. This is going to, 1, let me hear your voice so that I can tell if you've been using. Also, I can tell if you've been using by your thought process, how, if you're being constantly negative or if your words are making sense. But also it's going to show me that you're alive, because I don't think you care if you live anymore." And I was like, "Okay, I can do that." So every day for the next 6 months, I called him. And on days that he answered, we had amazing conversations. I mean, conversations that a father and a daughter would have. And he became this relationship, this void fill that I had been searching and wanting for my whole life. was to be loved, and better yet, by a father-like figure that, wasn't out to punish me, but whose goal was to heal. And finally, when the six month of check-ins ended, I ended up calling him like 6 months and a day. Called him, and I was like, he answered. I was like, "Hey Chuck, like, how are you? My day went great." Da, da, da. I was just on cloud nine, and he's like, "Hey Mal, like, you don't have to call me anymore. Like, your check-ins are over, like, for the rest of the probation." And for most people, like, they'd be super excited about that, but for me, I was crushed. I didn't want these check-ins to end. I didn't want this to end, this, relationship. But he's like, "I've loved you until you were strong enough to begin to learn how to love yourself." And from that day on, I did exactly that. I started living, and I ended up enrolling into school to get my bachelor's in healthcare, because I thought that healthcare was going to be the one place that I could help the most people, because I had spent so much of my life manipulating that system, that I wanted to be a part of making it better. And I ended up meeting my husband today, actually. He pulled me out of the homeless shelter. They made me move out of my mom's house. And I ended up going to the homeless shelter. Well, he actually came to the homeless shelter. He's like, "Mal, I don't want you here. I have a room to rent. Please just come live with me, like, rent free until you're on your feet." And I was like, okay. So I ended up coming and living here. Chuck had to come, look at the whole house, and he looked right at Wes, and he was like, "Listen, she's codependent. She's messed up in the head. Like, don't be going and, dating or seeing or being interested at all." And he's like, "Okay, I will." So over the next year and a half, Wes and I developed an amazing friendship, an amazing, he ended up going to all my family therapies. He knew nothing about addiction. And he really got to see me work through some of my deepest underlying causes. And before we knew it, it's like when you help someone heal so deeply, it's hard not to fall in love with them. It's hard not to, gain this love for them. And life was going really, really good. And Wes ended up proposing. And once I graduated, he proposed. And and one night I just started crying. And Wes is like, "Well, what's wrong?" And I'm like, "We can't get married. Like, I don't have a dad to walk me down the aisle. Like, you have to have a dad." And he's like, "Why don't you ask Chuck?" A couple days later, I tried calling Chuck. There was no answer. Actually, let me rewind for a minute. We ended up right before I was about to graduate probation. There was a knock on the door, and I opened it, and there was an envelope on the carpet. And I opened it up, and it was a full clearance of my entire record. Every felony, every misdemeanor wiped clean. Yeah. And it's funny because with my degree, I told him how bad I wanted to go in healthcare. And the school actually was like, "You can't, like, you won't pass the background check at the end. Like, you're going to go all the way through school and never get your degree." And I had told Chuck, and he's like, "Just follow your heart, Mel. Like, do what you want to do." And I ended up going for the healthcare anyway. And I think it's because he had planned to give me that full clearance if I was willing to work for it. So I was no longer a felon anymore, which is a pretty incredible gift. Anyway, so over the next while, I was calling Chuck, trying to get a hold of him to walk me down the aisle. And I wasn't getting any responses. And in my mind, I was just thinking, well, maybe we can't continue this relationship, right? Because it was based on like it's a conflict of interest, basically, with his job. And so I just stopped calling him. The day before my wedding, I was getting ready and doing my hair, and we were packing everything up, trying to rush to get everything to New Harmony, is where we got married. And my phone rings, and I pick up the phone, and it's Chuck's best friend, Bobby. And sorry, guys.
Okay.
And Bobby says, Mel, I'm sorry to be calling you with bad news, but Chuck was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and they just put him on hospice, and he wants you to come see him. So I drop everything with my hair crazy, and I jump in the car, and my husband's like, where are you going? And I was like, I'll be back. I end up driving as fast as I can to his house, and his whole family was there. I had met his wife a few times during the process of probation. But because of, the client confidentiality, she really didn't know our relationship and how close we were as, a probation officer and what would you call it? Probationer. So all she knew was that he was saying he wanted to see me. So I ended up walking in there, and he's laying there being taken off all the things that were making him comfortable. And I just started bawling. I'm like, how can someone so beautiful that helps so many people be dying like this, be taken? So I sat there next to his on the bed, and he grabbed my hand, and he was like, Mel, sorry, I haven't been answering. And I was like, trying not to cry. I was like, yeah, I was calling you to see if you could walk me down the aisle tomorrow. Like, you're not even ready. And he tried to laugh with the amount of energy that he still had. And he goes, Mel, I'm not going to make it, but I want you to know that you're not lost, and that I'm so thankful that the judge gave me your case, and I'm so proud of you. He goes, but I need you to make me a promise. And I was like, okay. He's like, I need you to promise me that you're going to tell your story to as many addicts as you can. And obviously, with what was happening, I didn't realize the pressure of that promise. And I told him I promise. And I gave him a big hug and knew that this was going to be the last day I was ever going to get to see my hero. Like, he gave me more than I could have ever gotten myself. And he filled a void for me that would have continued affecting me, I'm sure, for so long. I ended up going to my wedding. I went from the worst day of my life to the best day of my life within 24 hours. And 3 days later, I was getting on a boat to get on a cruise for my honeymoon. And they told us our phones wouldn't work as we were in mid leaving. And all of a sudden my phone rings. And everyone around me is looking around like, what the hell? And I answer the phone, and it was the number that I recognized the number from the day before my wedding. And I answer it, and they're like, Chuck's gone.
Man.
So it took about a year out from that point to wonder, how was I going to fulfill this promise? How was I going to make sure that I did for him as much as I could for what he gave me? And I didn't want to let him down. Of all people, he put himself on the line so many times to make people believe that I could do better and I was worth saving. And so then then that's where things come in. One day, the one thing I did with Chuck was a picture. I never got a picture of me and him. Super sad about that. So I ended up grabbing my journal one night and I ended up writing every single thing I remembered about him, every lesson he had ever taught me, every quote he had ever given me, every memory I had of him, I wrote in this book. And I realized that right in front of me was the promise fulfilled, that I was going to carry on every lesson, and I was going to help others heal just the way he did for me, by inspiring them and not by punishing them, trying to get rid of the stigma that, there's such thing as too far gone, because if anyone was too far gone, I would have hit it.
Yeah. Wow. Like, yeah, I'm lost for words at this point. That's rare for me. Ryan knows that. I'll ramble. But as I reflect on it, as we look at what we do and what we train in, and what we teach, and the journey, sometimes people feel like they're too far gone. I have a friend I had a conversation with tonight, and he feels that way about himself, and you wonder, are they going to stay in the game and hang with us, or are they going to check out? And I hope that they don't, and in some ways they check out in the forms like you're talking about with drugs, and they check out that way because they just don't feel like they matter anymore. Right.
Right.
And to see somebody step in, I've had people in my life that have stepped in and given me that kind of attention and love that made me feel like I mattered. And it did have an impact, right?
Yeah.
A lot of what we created out of this has come from that. And so, man, to the Chucks of the world, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so today for me, where I am now, epilogue, I am just about to publish my book, Inspire to Recover. The very first page will be a big dedication to Chuck. I am a mom of 2 little girls. I have a 2-year-old named Ravi, which means to own the world, and a 4-year-old named Adelie, which means the light of the world. And been with Wes for about 8 years now, married for 3. And I've been the manager at a little cafe here in town for nearly 8 years now. I got that job right where I was about to start the probation. So that has been such a blessing. I have so many amazing coworkers that, not only do I feel like I have a second family of people who love me, despite, blood family, but also this job has been such a revolving door for me to be able to meet anyone that, Chuck, or for me, God believes that I need to meet, to impact and to influence. And so that has been such an amazing blessing. And now I get to travel around and speak to high schools, and I get to tell this story in so many different ways. And it's funny. Like, I feel like the more you tell the story, the more things you remember, right? Like, all these feelings start getting regurgitating, and it's awesome to be able to relive it with the mind that I have now, and be able to look back and identify that those underlying causes, there's a period where they can be dealt with. And there may not be effects from them if we can learn early enough, right? Like, as you were saying earlier, if we have that help. And the beautiful thing too is that my mom is sober today. My mom and I are both sober today. And she has been a huge part of my life and my recovery, and we just get to boost each other through it. And yeah, I mean, I'm honestly, like, people ask me, if you could go back, do you wish your life would have went a different way? Like, do you wish you could have found out what you would have became if you wouldn't have become an addict? And my answer is no. Like, it wouldn't have mattered what career choice I would have chosen. I know I'm about to become and do something much bigger than anything I could have ever come up with on my own. Yeah. All because of a promise that gave me the drive to make sure that, like, I'm going to not only fulfill this promise, but I'm going to make sure the world knows Chuck's name.
That's awesome. I would ask you this, if you were to look at somebody that's maybe going through something similar and you could share a piece of wisdom with them about the whole experience, what would you share?
Well, one of them would be, you are who you hang out with. That is something that plays a part in my story a lot. And my book is in first person. So it's not me telling the story. I'm actually placing you in the book, and feeling everything that I'm going through and why I make the decisions I make. But that is something that has constantly been a pattern throughout the book, is I'm always putting myself with people who I feel like I'm equal to in value.
Yeah.
And it's not about that. Surround yourself with the people that live the dream that you want to live, because you are a piece of the 5 people you hang out with. And, that's because you're with them all the time that you start adapting their habits and their, like my husband, he loves pizza and eats every night before bed. And what quality do you think I'm starting to pick up? Starting to eat pizza more often,
Coffee and pizza.
Yeah.
Before bed. Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Coffee. Yeah. But also for anyone out there that's listening, that if you ever have had the doubt or thought that you're too far gone, I just want you to know that, like, you are not alone. And there are so many beautiful ways that you can create the life that you want to live and make it look however you want, despite the people around you, despite the people that, tell you you can't do it or bring you down. Tell them and go show them that dreams are possible. Like today, I mean, if you would have asked me 10 years ago where I was going to be at 28, this is definitely not what I would have ever guessed for myself. So
it's amazing. Ryan, do you have additional thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's interesting that you would, at the beginning of this, when we were talking about what we'd expect through the show and things like that, and you were asking us the kind of the format. You went through most of the questions that we would have asked anyway, almost perfectly. Like, we sat in silence most of the time because it fell in line perfectly. This message needed to be told. I could feel God and I could feel Chuck. And it was a beautiful message. And those that are not going through heavy addiction can still find so much strength and so much wisdom inside of this story, inside of your experience. And I related so much to what you were going through, not being an addict, not being an alcoholic, but having my own personal issues and my own personal demons and doubts and fears and worries and anxieties and depressions and all the things that come up in life. I found strength in your story that I'm not too far gone. I got told today it was. Everyone knows I'm a crybaby. I got called Nick Smith. I got called Nick today by somebody. And I said, that's perfect. That's fine. If you call me Nick Smith, man, I'm proud as hell to be called Nick Smith. And the person corrected themselves, no, you be you. And I said, no, that's exactly how I want to be. It's just like Nick Smith, and or Malory, or Al Richards, or Alex Dumas, or Hugh, or any of those people that watch that are giants that are watching, that are participating, that are living their life, that despite or in spite of all of the crap that can happen, that choose to love themselves and to love other people and to share that message of you're not too far gone. And yeah,
I was just going to say, I think that the biggest problem right now that we face is disconnection in this world, and it's being able to recreate. I mean, they used to tell me there used to be a joke in the addiction world that love is your biggest resource, but it wasn't a joke. That's true. Love is our biggest resource, and it's also our biggest tool to fix anything. And I think just being open and willing to love someone, regardless of if you know them, do it anyway. It's a reflection of your character, but also like you don't know the impact you could be having on someone. And like when you've seen as much darkness as I have, going from sitting on the streets of Vegas with a needle hanging out of my arm at 75 pounds to where I am today, like you just want to shine light, you just want to be light, and you just want to be positive no matter how much negative is going on around you. And I just think that remembering that, especially for any parents that are watching this, something that I do with my girls to make sure that I can do my part as a mom is like before bed, I have them repeat after me, or if I'm doing their hair, mainly before bed when we do story time. I'll say, Kay, repeat after me. And I'll say, you are strong. And she'll say, I am strong. I'll say, you are beautiful. She'll say, I am beautiful. And it's just being able to get those habit forming thoughts early on, and getting their confidence to a point where they don't have to rely on anyone to validate their self-worth. So
I see a lot of beautiful connections through the whole thing. It's like no matter how far gone you think you are and how far down the journey you think you've gone, right, there's still that hope that you can turn it around. And I also hear inside of this, like what you're doing with your daughters is you're preparing them so that they never even have to go down that path. Like you're really setting them up, right? Yeah, I get that as a mom, like you cross your fingers and just really hope that they don't, but you're laying the foundation for that. And so just giving them a head start on feeling loved and supported and being present with them is huge. I look at my kids and man, as a parent, you wonder what they're experiencing inside. So I check in with them a lot. Like, how are you doing? What's going on for you? I want to know, but not from a space of, like you say, punishing. They grew up in an environment where it was punishing, and that doesn't feel good. I mean, that caused you to do a lot of what you did and what I did. But with my kids, there's this space, and that's what you're creating with your kids. There's this space to just be themselves and train them and teach them, some good principles that'll support them through life. I think they've got a good head start on things,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I feel like with where we live, there is a sense of sheltering that naturally happens in this state. And I see it a lot around here, where parents think that a child not knowing reality or the truths and the darkness of the world, it'll keep them from it. But for me, it just made me curious of it, and I've heard kind of a lot of mixed angles on this, but a lot of people say, parents are supposed to be parents, not best friends. But I am both. I can absolutely be 100% my kid's best friend. And even if they tell me, like, when they're mad at me or when any of our family are having a problem, even in my marriage, when my husband and I are, fighting, we are able to go from like marriage to friendship. Like, hey, I need to talk to my friend right now. So that way I can say anything I want to about my husband, right? And he's not going to be able to react like a husband.
Like, I love you, but I don't like you right now.
yeah. And I'll talk
Right.
about it. You're able, if you can separate the identity, it
Look,
makes
you
it a lot
MFer, we're going to be friends for a minute. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, listen, I need to talk to you like my bestie and not my
Yeah.
husband, because my husband's pissing me off right now, But no, it's actually been awesome, and it's something I do
Yeah.
want to implicate with my kids, so that they know that they can come to me no matter what. I don't ever want my kids to feel they have to hide something because they're in fear of being in trouble. So,
Yeah. I think that's huge. And so, man, this went in the direction we wanted to go, but in a different way than I thought it might play out. So I like it.
Good.
I think it's going to serve a lot of people. And so we appreciate you being on the show. Is there anything else that you want to share?
Yeah, so my book is available to pre-order right now
Okay.
on my website for it's rueschrecovery.com. And yeah, definitely order that book because it's going to be a real good one. The first 100 people, I've opened it to 150 now, but first 150 people will get an autographed copy, a numbered edition, and also a free gift with their package. So
That's awesome. Perfect. Well, thanks for being on the show. Thanks for your story. For those that are watching, remember you're exactly where you're supposed to be. You're right on time, and you're doing exactly what you should be doing. So hang into that. And we love you, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Love you too.